Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Crime and Entertainment. We have here a guy who I've had the pleasure of being on a few podcasts with. We've actually reviewed the movie The Mob King, starring Ciro DiPaggio, Robert Lasardo, who's also been a guest on our show, and a few others. So this is the first time I think he's actually been on my show, and he runs a podcast as well. It's called Invest in Yourself Clothing, and he's got some information he's going to drop on us because he's been working on something for quite a while, and I'm going to let him kind of fill you in on the details. Please welcome to Crime Entertainment, Adrian Martinez. Adrian, how you doing, my friend?
Hey man, great man. I appreciate that wonderful intro. I always love hearing your intros, man, because you do a damn good job on that, man. So thank you for that. But
Thank you. Yeah, so I was on your show, I guess 6 months ago or so, baby.
yeah.
I know a lot of times I don't pay no attention to when stuff airs because I know that just because you record it, it could be 6 months or so before it comes out.
That's
But
damn true.
you've done a lot. We've interviewed a lot of the same people, a lot of guys in the mob genre, a lot of former police officers, ATF agents, and things like that with Ignacio Esteban and guys like that. So tell us a little bit, I guess, like what got you into this podcasting in the first place?
Well, when I first started, it originally came from, an idea, invest in yourself clothing. So that's where that came from. And that was during COVID, when everybody had more free time and at home and shit, so we all had some shit we were going through. And so, my thing was, I got into wanting to make a clothing brand that, I can stand behind and represent. And I eventually, a year later, I wanted to start giving my brand a voice. And so I started interviewing local people, and doing interviews with them, and getting their definition on how they invest in themselves. And then eventually it branched off to actors, comedians, you name it, business owners. And then eventually it led into the mobsters, gangsters, and everything, because they got a good redemption story,
Yeah.
so that's my thing, you know what I mean? So if I can throw in some kind of redemption twist on there, that's invest in yourself.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I find cool about these because yeah, these guys have lived some amazing lives. Some of them has done some ruthless shit,
Yeah.
but by and large, they've done their time. They've paid their debts to society. Some may or may not have cooperated. But at the end of the day, nobody is out here. Nobody that I've interviewed from that life is out here saying you need to be a fucking gangster. It's fun. It's
Never.
do they say they miss the lifestyle? Yeah,
Yeah.
I imagine a lot of people did. They felt like they were king of the world, but not one person has said like that's something that they promote people do. Everybody says by and large, it's probably the exact opposite. Most people say, the loyalty, the honor, the code they say they live by is non-existent. Like when you go to jail, nobody sends you envelopes, nobody takes care of your people.
No.
They do the exact opposite. They rob you blind. They take everything you work for.
Yep.
Larry Manza said when he was in prison, the envelopes got smaller and smaller every week till there was nothing.
Right. And
Ruggiano said they didn't even take care of his mother while he was in jail. It's crazy.
yeah, and see, those are people I've had on my show, and that, yes, of course, they both said that. And on this documentary that I'm going to be coming out with, about the American Mafia, I had Larry Mazza on there, and 10 plus guys, come on there and, recommend. And I asked them, during our interview, because I have them in each episode, there's a different guy or whatever. I'll explain it a little bit down the road, but they all I asked them, would you recommend this life to anyone? Not a single one of them said, yeah, I would recommend this shit. So they all said the same thing: dead, prison, or becoming an informant. So it don't end well.
Yeah, I mean, I can't name to you none of the guys that we've talked to that really didn't spend a decent amount of time in jail. Luckily, all of them are able to be out and free now, and I mean, a lot of them are doing things to, help in many different ways. Ruggiano's doing the Reform Gangsters to help addicts. Maz, I think's doing a gym now. He's got a TV show that's getting some of these guys' stories out. So everybody's kind of got their own little thing that they're doing to try to spin this negative into a positive as best they can. I think
exactly.
That's the biggest thing you can do with a situation. You were dealt I don't even say dealt, but you were part of a hand of a lot of negativity. So do what you can do to spin it positive. Spread your message that hey, this might look cool from the outsider's perspective, but you know, the end result is not what anyone wants. It's time away from your family. And some people don't even get out. There's a lot of people these guys speak on that I'm sure you had conversations about that are never getting out of prison, that are going to die in there.
Yeah.
Definitely not as glamorous as sometimes the Hollywood makes it seem on feature films, but great listening material for people that
Exactly.
were involved.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of people are going to live vicariously through these stories that you and I get to, you know, have guys on our podcast to explain themselves, because there's not a lot of people going to have the balls to do all that. And especially nowadays, you know, nobody's doing anything like that now. I mean, half the guys stuff that these guys did, they'd be caught in a minute now, and with all the technology. So
I
times
did a
change, but you know, it's good to hear the conversation.
You're right. And I did a segment with Frank Dimatteo and then Derek Galanis. You know, I sent you his info if you want to
Yeah.
interview him. But you know, I did a segment with them, you know, because Frank was part of that Joey Gallo, you know, era. You know, he was a little bit younger than them guys or whatever, but you know, he was part of that old school era. And then, you know, Derek was, you know, he got caught up with, you know, doing financial scams and, you know, drug dealing. That's, I guess, completely different from what it used to be, you know, back then, and, you know, all the surveillance and everything. And, you know, in my documentary, you know, I talk about that as well. You know, we cover that in there. You know, there's a lot of different people giving their perspective, law enforcement, mob experts, and obviously the guys that were involved in that life.
Right. So when did you know, when you were in the middle of all this, that you were thinking about doing a documentary?
Well, when I've been doing interviews and stuff, you know, I got more and more, you know, um, drawn into the, you know, the whole mafia stuff. So I started watching movies. I started watching all these documentaries and shit. And I'm like, damn,
Now,
I've
were
had
you
all.
into this shit before you started interviewing these guys?
Yeah. Since a kid, man, like I've been interested. You know, I always watched the Goodfellas, the Bronx Tale, you know, all that shit. But you know, I always had that interest, you know, towards gangsters, whether it was, you know, L.A. gangs or, you know, not that I wanted to be one, but just, you know, interested, you know, in the level of, you know, hearing these guys' stories and music and stuff. But you know, then eventually, you know, I got into the podcasting and I interviewed Bobby Luisi and stuff, and then it branched off to Larry Manza and then everyone else that came along, you know. But you know, after, you know, probably 6 or 7 months, you know, I did so many interviews, and I'm just laying in bed one night and I'm just thinking, like, tossing and turning, like I could do I could make a documentary myself. So I, you know, was like, fuck it, I'm gonna do it, and I'll just make a little 45-minute documentary. Well, I thought about it more, and I was like, okay, well, now I've done so many with different guys from a different crime family. So I did 11 different episodes all together. You know, I was thinking, you know, who could I interview? And I started doing that. And I interviewed someone from, you know, each crime family. And then, you know, I just kind of branched into that, you know, because I wanted to cover more than just a 45-minute topic, you know, or a 45-minute thing. You know, I wanted to make a series. So I made a documentary series about, you know, the 5 New York families, the Trafficante, Chicago outfit, Jewish Mafia, Philadelphia, Patriarchal crime family. And then after that, I started interviewing the law enforcement, you know, like Gary Jenkins, you know, you just had him on, or
Yeah.
you did him a long time ago or whatever. But Ignacio, this other guy named Lou Veloce, I think he was on your show too,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Lou's great. Yeah.
Yeah, him too. And then, you know, then just the guys from the mob genre that, you know, interview these people, like Tom LaVecchia came on. Uh, who else did I have on? I even had a grandson of Joe Bonanno come on as well. Salvatore Bonanno is his name. He was a good
Wow.
one. But you know, a lot of different people that, you know, could give their expertise on it, you know, whether they were a relative to the people or not, you know. But you know, it just kind of went into that. And hell, I had to put a lot of work into it. I didn't think there was going to be so much, but 6 months later, you know, here I am finally promoting. That's what stages I'm in. So, you know, I'll be dropping this in a month or two.
Okay.
But you got any questions or any
Yeah.
add-ins I should
So,
expand on?
I mean, like, so you kind of you've got someone from each crime family.
Mm-hmm.
Are the guys from law enforcement mixed in with this DVD too, or mixed in with his biography?
DVD.
Yeah. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, from them, I guess Gary Jenkins, you know, he talks about the Las Vegas and, you know,
skim and shit
but
like that.
yeah, so I mean, he has a little bit of involvement, but you know, some guys, they just give their input from a law enforcement perspective. I tried to find more, but these guys, like law enforcement, they're hard to come by because, they're not really out there for the attention or whatever. They don't have a book. They don't have nothing to promote. I mean, it's like, some could care less, but some can, really want to. But I mean, it's just up to the person. But trying to find these people, I mean, it takes a lot, and hell, I can find too much.
Oh,
but
we're damn near like half-ass private investigators, because I mean,
yeah,
tracking some of these people down is not easy. And then once you track them down, like not everybody responds to social media messages.
nope.
You have to get emails and in some cases phone numbers, and you almost feel like a version of a stalker trying to
Yeah.
contact these people sometimes. And it's
Oh hell yeah,
crazy.
man! I'll send it to their Facebook, Instagram,
Yeah, send it
Indeed,
to
whatever.
everywhere. And you get lucky though when they have books. Like Ignacio's got like
True.
probably 100 by now. I don't know when the last time I had him on.
Yeah, no,
He does
I
like
know.
20 books every time we sit down to do another interview. He's got like 20 books he's dropped. But
Yeah,
and Lou's got a book as well. So
it makes it easier.
those guys, it makes it a little bit more easily accessible, because obviously, they're doing you a favor by coming on your platform. You're doing them a favor by obviously pushing their book. So it's a
Yeah.
win-win for both guys. And I mean, I think that's a real neat aspect. And I don't really know who kind of started that. I think I can't remember if that was on your show or somebody's, where someone had McBride and Ignacio together.
Oh, I think that was Bill Stacks.
It might have been
Yeah,
Stacks.
that's a good segment.
And I thought that was a neat kind of way to do that. And I've got one, and matter of fact, I don't think I've even dropped it yet. But I had Brian O'Day, who was another notorious marijuana smuggler, and I had Tim McBride on. So it was kind of like getting tips from both sides of the fence of smugglers, but then we can go and we can get that from the cops, and you can get the 2 cents, because I think it's always that cat and mouse game is very interesting.
Yeah.
A lot of times these guys actually do respect each other. It's not a, hey, obviously they're not going to go to a barbecue or anything together, but I think there is a certain level of respect, for these guys and what they do. They understand that, just like the scene in Heat, that the guy's pretty much, he's like, my job is to take scores. And other guys like, my job is to stop people like you. And I think there's an understanding with that, especially in, the mob.
And you're right. I mean, I did one with, I did a segment. I've done a few, but the one that really popped off was with Larry Manza and Frank Dimatteo. I did informant versus non-informant. They give off their case on, why Frank never cooperated and why Larry cooperated. And they both came to an understanding. There was no arguing, no fighting, but hell, it did really well and people enjoyed it. And shit, I just let them talk. I threw out questions and hell, they went at it, but people enjoy that kind of shit. The not controversy, but that I guess it's controversy kind of, but I don't know what you'd call it.
Yeah, and Larry was interesting because Larry didn't necessarily put away like guys from the life. I think his was mostly like dirty cops and shit.
I think so too. Yeah, I think so. From what I can recall, he said cooperation was what, or the corruption is what he had. But
yeah,
and he talks about that in the documentary too.
Okay, so how long is this documentary in total?
Well, each episode is 20 to 30 minutes, so whatever the hell that is times 11.
11?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I mean,
but a minute. Now, are you going to release these in segments, or are you going to release it as one big show? How are you doing it?
I'll drop them here in 2 months. I'll drop them in let's see, in April. I'll start dropping them one a week, and then just let them come out and roll out like that, and then. Yeah, I think that's how I'll do it. And I'll just promote it on everything as I can, man. Just make sure I get as much views and everything on there. I was going to bring up too, it's not just about, it's not about just the mafia guys or whatever like that I interviewed. I mean, I go from the beginning to, present to the end, of each boss that was, had, the timeline of bosses, how they made their money, wars that was going on. In internal hits, other hits, in different families and stuff. But I talk about the wars, the Gallo War, when obviously with the Colombos and the Gallo crew, and you know what I mean. So it's not just about the mafia guys that I interviewed, because there's so much more than just that. So I cover the the Gambino history, who was the first boss up until today and shit like that.
Yeah, so a little bit deeper than the average person, because I mean,
Mhm.
people that aren't necessarily, I would say, like connoisseurs of all this information. Obviously, they're going to know names like John Gotti. They may know
Right.
like Carlo Gambino. A lot of people have no idea who Paul Castellano was or who was
Yeah.
boss before Gambino. I mean, the lineage, all the way back. So that's interesting for people to get a little bit more inside information. Have you ever been to New York?
Yeah, I went to New York probably 2013, 2014. It's been a long time, man. But dude, I would love to go down there and film all these places, and just do like some walkthroughs and meet, because shit, I got friends all over the fucking US now.
Yeah, and I went down there and we shot some stuff with Ramundi that I'm working on getting released here soon.
I remember
And
that.
he showed us a bunch of stuff around Brooklyn, but a lot of the stuff now is obviously, redone. Of course, the Ravenite is something completely different now.
Yeah.
All those places that those guys used to hang out. But the city aspect, man, I'm walking. I've always been a hustler, whether it was CDs back in the day or movies or whatever the case may be. I've always been that guy, buy for $1 and sell for two. It's the American way.
Yeah.
New York is like the epitome of, it's like a hustler's heaven.
Oh, I know.
I could be I remember one time way before I was ever in the podcasting game, the first time I ever visited, I was down there with my wife. I don't know, we might have just been dating at the time, but we were walking around. I mean, it started raining like just kind of out of nowhere. Not heavy, but it definitely a little come down. And I mean, like bam, on cue. Umbrellas, $5. I mean, they had any fucking thing you want, and it really is the city that never sleeps. And I could see to where back in those days, if you were, a figure in the organized crime world, the money that was in and around you at your disposal had to be insane. I mean, people were just flocking there. And I mean, these guys were getting a piece of everything.
Yeah, I mean, literally anything that they wanted to be kicked up to them. Anybody that they felt needed to kick up to them, that's who they went after, man. And there's thousands, hundreds of thousands of people that live there, so it's definitely going to be endless. Hell, I remember I went to New York too, man. I was, like I said, only 13, 14 years old when I went there. I mean, there was people selling pipes and shit on the corner, so I just looking at them, oh my god, that's cool, as a kid. And then like the guy is like, hey, you want some? You want it? And I was like, sure. And then after, guess what? There's a guy right next to it. He's like, want to buy some weed? I
Yeah.
didn't, but because I was like, man, I don't trust this dude, you know what I mean? And after that, they're like, and then I'm walking down the street, and then this other guy want to buy a Rolex. It's just like crazy shit,
Oh, they
bro.
hit me with the Rolex, but let me tell you a story about this Rolex. I'm in the store. I think I went in like a bodega or something just to buy a drink, and this guy catches me at the back. He's like, "Hey man, hey, I got this watch for you. I got this Rolex." I'm like, "Man, come on, man, that shit's stolen." And he was like, or I was like, "It's fake." I think I said it's fake. He's like, "Nah, man, it ain't fake." He's like, "Look here," and so he takes it out, and he's like, "You got a quarter in your pocket?" I'm like, "Damn, he's fitting to rob me from a quarter." And I give him the quarter, and he's like scratching the hell out of the face of this thing. He's like, "Here, you think I'm lightly doing it?" He's like, "You do it." So I'm digging into the face of this thing, and it's not making a mark. And he's
Holy
like,
shit.
"Here, hold out that palm of your hand." So he was like beating it against the palm of my hand, and you could feel it vibrate. And I mean, like all these little things that he was telling me, and I'm sure he's full of shit. But this is this and this is this. So I bought it from him. I think I might have gave him like $75 for it or something along those lines. It wasn't a lot. It was under 100. And that watch still works today.
Holy shit.
Like
Really?
still today, it's outlasted half of the real watches that I bought. I bought Seiko watches. I bought a bunch of different other watches that have died. That watch that I bought off that dude in that bodega, which I'm sure is a fake Rolex, still works to this day. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of the best watches I've ever had. I mean, I'm sure it's fake, but it's one of the best watches that I've ever owned. And I don't know where he got it from, or, hell, I'm, like I said, I'm pretty sure it's fake. I don't know. It could be real. I don't know.
It could be. You don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I seriously doubt it. Otherwise, he'd have probably wanted a whole lot more money, but that's
Right.
all I was giving up for it at the time, just out of curiosity. Just, it's almost like, a picture at the Statue of Liberty or something. You got to
It's
go to New York and buy a fake Rolex.
yeah, it's like a gift shop.
Yeah. It's your street gift shop. But I mean, yeah, just you think about all the money those boys were making in construction, like Sammy, the
Yeah.
money that he had. I mean, everything that got built in New York, the mob had a piece of. Every concrete, bricklayer, sheetrock, all the construction stuff, man. I mean, millions and millions of dollars. And that's one of the things that, obviously I know Paul, when he was taken out, he wasn't looked at as a street guy. John, despised him. He didn't feel like he deserved, the job. However, I'm one of these people that I look at things from Carlo's point of view of I don't think he thought Paul was necessarily deserving of the job, but I think he felt Paul could take him in a more legitimized direction.
See, and I cover that in the documentary, because
Really?
yeah, you're right. I mean, that's exactly when I researched, that's exactly what I think was going on, because even Larry Manza, he was saying, Paul Castellano, he agreed, like Larry's like, yeah, I agreed with his ideas and, his thinking, like they would have took the whole mafia into a whole different, legitimate kind of thing, and they would have
Yeah.
had a stronghold and shit. But, like you said, John Gotti took him out, because they weren't getting along, because what was it? I think,
Well, the
Paul,
drugs, the drugs was
the
probably the
drugs, yeah.
biggest reason was
Yeah.
the drugs, the tapes that everything, and they had Ruggiero
Yeah.
on there,
Ruggiero, yeah.
which basically was gonna lead Paul to probably taking out the whole damn crew.
Yeah. So I mean that's exactly, and that's what was, I did my research and stuff, and they did not see Paul as being like that kind of the boss, because he was more of a businessman. He didn't really hang out with the lower tier of the crew, he just hung out with the top earners, and he wanted to be more business savvy. So that's what he did, man. So I don't know. I mean, each family's different. The Lucchese's, they were really silent, but man, were they deadly. Like they did hits and all kinds of stuff. And with the Genovese, I think they were looked at as one of the most powerful family, I think, or they were more strong, overlasting, like longevity. They made a lot of money.
Yeah, yeah, and the Chin, I mean, obviously led them for a great number of years. I got a chance to talk with his daughter,
I
Rita
seen that.
Yancey.
Hmm.
We actually have two shows. One hadn't come out yet. But really, really fascinating dude, the way he was trying to
No.
avoid, law enforcement being captured. It worked for a great period of time. Um,
When I was watching a documentary, like they did it good. Like they had him just in this, like this guy in the street walking around in a robe and shit. I mean, like, he just played like he was crazy, man, and he was the boss of the family, man. That's insane. No one else did that shit.
No, no. And you would think, people would look at that and think that's perceived as weak, but I don't know if they just appreciated the act
Yeah,
or what. You would think, what the hell is this guy doing walking around in a bathrobe? We can't take
yeah,
orders from somebody like this. But I think, he had put his stamp on that family for so long, and people knew that, that wasn't what he was, but it worked for a very long time. He was able to evade law enforcement for
yeah.
a very long time.
I talk about it on the documentary as well too, because that was looked at as, weak, like you said, and but for someone like him, he had pretty longevity, and in his early career, he almost got taken out, or not taken out, but he almost got sentenced to prison because he went and almost killed Frank Costello.
Yes. Yeah.
And
He shot him right through the fedora.
yeah,
Yeah.
and the funny thing with that is, like, in court, they asked Frank Costello, do you recognize this guy as the shooter? Vincent the Chin? He's like, no. He's like, I don't know. And then at the end of it, Vincent goes up to Frank and he's like, thanks, Frank. Shakes his hand, walks away after shooting him in the head.
Yeah.
But he stepped down after that, Frank Costello.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. The writing was on the wall for Frank because you got to figure that next one's not going to miss,
No.
Um, and I think the
No.
writing was on the wall for Frank, and Frank had done a real great job up until that point. He had made a lot of money and made the right connections. He was real tied into the Hollywood. Those guys were kind of that first wave of gangsters that, were mingling amongst the upper echelon guys like Bugsy Siegel, Frank
Yeah.
Costello. They were mingling with the upper echelon of society. So that was kind of like the first taste of it, way back in those days. Now, does your doc cover back in that some of the guys like Bugsy and
Yeah.
Meyer Lansky and some of those guys?
Yeah, of course. With the Jewish Mafia, I wanted to cover, because they were like a one generation, shit, my bad, one generational thing, family. You had the family for about 10 or so years, all these guys doing the bootlegging and everything. And then after that, they got their money and they left. But you got high ranking members, guys that went up and lasted longer, like, Bugsy Siegel and Meyer Lansky. They continued to do stuff and they had a relationship, with the Italians, and they made a lot of money. And what I talk about is, Arnold Rothstein. He was one of the OGs of the Jewish Mafia, and he was a mentor to Lucky Luciano, Frank Costello, Bugsy Siegel, Meyer Lansky, all these kids that went and started all their own families, and are not families, but became humongous mob figures. And
Right.
so, I mean, that started with the Jews. You know what I mean? So I cover that as well. Yeah. So in the Jewish Mafia, I talk a lot about those guys right there.
So are you kind of like me in the fact that you've probably seen, about any mob movie that there is,
I think almost now.
regardless of fact or fiction? I understand Hollywood has to
Right.
glorify certain things, but did you ever see the movie Mobsters with Patrick Dempsey?
What is the storyline?
It's all of those guys we just mentioned. It's so Christian Slater plays
Mhm.
Lucky Luciano.
Okay.
Patrick Dempsey, who was in a ton of movies in the 80s, plays Meyer Lansky. Um, Richard Grieco, I think, plays Bugsy. And I think that's Costas Mandalore that plays
Okay.
Costello, I believe. Don't quote me on that one. But Rothstein is also in there. His character's in there. I can't remember that guy's name, but he's been in a ton of shit. He was the guy in Scarface that they threw out of the plane for being an informant for the police.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah. Towards the end of it.
Yeah, he's that
Yeah.
old guy. He's been in like every fucking movie
Yeah.
you think of
Hmm.
from back in the day. But it basically follows them, and then obviously it to the end when they take out what was that, Maranzano,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
um
Okay.
what's the other guy they took out?
Okay. So Salvatore Maranzano and Joe Masseria. Joe
Masseria,
Masseria.
yeah.
Yeah. I
So
talk about them guys too.
okay, so in that movie, it shows them take out both of those guys. I
Hmm.
think whichever one they took out at the restaurant, they took him out first. They kind of set it up to where, and I don't know if this, you probably know a little bit about more if you research it. I'm going strictly off the movie now, and I'm not
Yeah.
saying this is fact, but they kill one guy in the restaurant first, and later on they pretend to be like IRS agents and they kill one in the building. Now, I think as
Hmm.
far as that goes, I think that's fact. The way the movie kind of lined it in there was that that guy had killed Charlie's father years ago, and Charlie was getting
Right.
revenge, and so I don't think that part's very accurate, but and then after that, it kind of set the stage for what would become, the commission and the
Yeah.
families, having everybody having a head at the family. So yeah, it's a real good movie. If you hadn't seen it, I recommend at least give it a watch just because it's in that subgenre.
Right. Yeah, no, and I think I might have, but when you're talking about, Salvatore Maranzano and Joe Masseria, like they had this war that was
Mhm.
going on. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it was
Yeah.
the Castellamare War, Castellamare
Yeah,
War. I always
Castellamare, I think is what. Yeah,
And yeah, and that's where these two guys were beefing. One of them wanted to be the take over the territory, and
yeah, boss of bosses, basically.
boss of boss. What would they call it? Capo de Chuchi or
Yeah,
what?
Capita Tutti Capi, I think it is.
Yeah, yeah, there you go. Yeah, man. See, you're more fluent with that shit than me, but like, I mean, it's interesting, to see they call them the mustache Pete's, the old OGs, like to hear that history, and like what guy was from, okay, after the commission was formed, before the commission was formed, who was the actual like boss of, the Bonanno family, like, and it's Salvatore Maranzano. But, after the commission is when it was all established, and that's what everybody knows. But I did research and went even further back. So I cover like the first two bosses or whatever, like the actual bosses of the when it was considered like a gang, you know what I mean? But then it branched off, and then once the commission came, the Bonanno family came, the Lucchese, everybody came, So, I mean, it's really interesting, and that's what I just really like to go into depth because I know other people are going to want to hear that as well. And
Yeah, and see, I've watched all those guys' stories, like Bugsy, the
hmm.
movie with Warren Beatty.
Hmm.
That was a good one. I know a lot of people didn't necessarily like it. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, me too.
Um, I really like. Did you see Boss of Bosses with Chaz Palminteri, where he played
Yeah, he played Paul
Paul?
Castellano. Yeah.
I thought that was good in the sense of now I like Gotti probably better than all of them, you know, the
Mhm.
96 Gotti with Armando Santi, but
Yep.
I like that one just from the perspective of you've seen more of where Paul was trying to take things.
Mhm.
And the Gotti, maybe not so much.
Yeah. I
But
think I agree.
you know, still a good one. What about the Travolta Gotti? What'd you think of that?
That was the newer one, right?
Yes.
Well, I mean, they can't. Well, when I'm watching all of them, I don't even know. Like, I mean, it's hard to follow the storyline because I've been watching all these ones, bro. So I don't know. I mean, you're gonna have to kind of give me a refresher on it. I
I
mean,
mean, it was Travolta. He played Gotti. Leo Rossi, I think, was like his number two. It more kind of centered around his son. I was just more
Junior.
or less focusing on like the portrayal of. I thought John did an okay job of playing Gotti, but the storyline just didn't really do it for me. It was kind of all over the place. It was kind of mixed up.
And
Um,
I recall now they said that with that movie they went through so many producers or some shit or
They did. They went through
directors
a
and
lot of producers, a lot of directors, a lot of rewrites. I think originally Stallone was in talks to play that role. That
yeah,
fell through. Joe Pesci and Al Pacino at one time were in talks to play.
that would have been good.
I heard, now I'm pretty sure this is accurate because there's documentation of the lawsuit. Al Pacino was going to play Neil Delacroix,
Damn.
and Joe Pesci was going to play Angelo Ruggiero,
Huh,
and
I
he
could see
put
that.
on some weight to do this.
Hmm.
And I guess somehow another script fell through or whatever, and he actually sued the production or the director. Somebody, he sued somebody. Now
Wow.
I'm pretty sure that's fact. I actually seen something saying that that happened, but don't quote me on that. If anybody's listening, don't beat me up if that's not true. But what could have been with that movie with those
Hmm.
cast, it could have been something special. It didn't really turn out exactly the way I think everybody wanted. It wasn't the worst movie I've ever seen by any means, but I
Right.
think I just had such high hopes for it, with everything behind it. But I think with all the script rewrites, it really, really hurt the film. What's your favorite about all of them that you've watched? What do you put up there at the top?
I probably think I always loved, obviously the OG ones I was telling you at the beginning, like Bronx Tale. I mean, that one, growing up, my dad would always play that one over and over.
Yeah.
And, just to hear the storyline, I even the documentary I reference, one thing, and what was it? The worst thing in life is wasted talent. That was at the end with Sonny in the casket and stuff. But ones that are like more meaningful and have a good message like that. So I really like that one, and even the one that you're talking about with the Paul Castellano, that one's good. But obviously love Casino. Just a lot of them, because they just they were like one of the I don't know, the original ones. I don't know. They always had some good meaning, because in Casino, the guy he almost got blown up at the end or whatever and stuff. But, you just can't fuck over the wrong people because it always comes and bites you in the ass, man. And
Well, that he didn't really fuck over anybody. That was Nikki trying to kill. Well, I say Nikki did Nikki in the movie, but real life it was Tony Spilotro. But that was Tony trying to kill him because he was sleeping with his wife.
oh, well, so not that one, but oh yeah. Well, see, like I said, man, I just watch a lot of these ones, and they just kind of blend in because this last 6 months, man, I've just been watching so many of them, so I just kind of
I
go
think
in with them.
he even makes mention of that. He said the bombing was never authorized, but I suspect I know who lit the fuse. And
Hmm.
then right after that, Joe Pesci's character gets, beat down in there. But yeah, it's been reported that because he was sleeping with in the movie's name's Ace, I think in real life is Lefty Rosenthal, but
Yeah.
Spilotro was sleeping with his wife Jerry, and that's why he was trying to do because he was afraid that he was going to make a beef back home, which is a huge deal. Those guys didn't really
Mhm.
co-sign on fucking around with other people's wives and stuff like that, even though it was done
Oh yeah.
often. Like Paul Vario and Jimmy Burke, I think, was sleeping around with Karen, Henry Hill's wife. Now, the only caveat to that is Henry Hill wasn't a made guy, so there wasn't really nothing he could do about it.
Hmm.
So there is that. But like as far as you being like a made guy, which I guess Frank wasn't made either. He wasn't even Italian. He was Jewish.
Yeah, I think so too because I don't know. I never heard of anything of him being made.
No, he wasn't made. I know he wasn't made. So yeah, maybe that's it. They can fuck around with your wife if you're not 100% in the clique. You better watch your wife around these guys.
Yeah, no shit. I mean, you just never know. I mean, even made guys got to watch their ass, you know. So
Yeah.
I covered that in the documentary, man, because not hell, even bosses in this life get killed. You know, in my trailer, you know, I said that. You know, none of them are safe, man. You know, I think Chicky, you know, said it well about his boss in Springfield, the Aldolfo,
Bruno.
Yeah. But yeah, and I mean, nobody's safe in that life because it don't matter who you are, man. John Gotti killed his own boss. I mean, it's treacherous.
We've had Anthony here a lot on our show a number of times. We do a lot of different stuff together with the gambling stuff like that. That's who was behind the hit you're referencing there.
Yep.
In Springfield. So yeah,
he wished me happy birthday today.
Yeah. Oh, it's your birthday today?
Yeah.
Oh shit! Happy birthday, man! I hadn't
you.
been on the book all day. I've been working, so happy birthday.
It. Thank you.
Well, I can't wait for this documentary to come out, man. I've been a fan of yours. I've watched you, you know, grow in this game, and I watch a lot of your. If there's somebody that I haven't interviewed yet and they've been on your show, you know, I go to your show for you know, coaching and references to see how you handle it, and you know, that's the thing is we can all interview the same people, but still have a different, you know, presentation. So
right.
You know, I try to ask different questions or at least phrase them a little differently, or maybe dig deeper into something that somebody might not have. You know, there's things that I'm sure when you research for somebody, there's key points you want to dig into. So some points you might not dig into as much because you want to focus on these. So then my job is, okay, well, he didn't really get into that, so let me get into that, because that lets another viewer hear a different side of the story. So they can watch my episode that's, you know, an hour 20 minutes long, and then go watch yours that's hour and 20 minutes long and hear different shit on both sides of the fence. So, you know, keep doing what you're doing, man. You're doing a fantastic job. And, you know, let us know. Do you have a set release date yet, or you still hadn't nailed down a set release date?
No, not yet, but for sure in April, I'm thinking.
Well, I'm sure you got some trailers. I know you sent me a few in some emails. So what I'll do is I'll tack that in with this interview when I drop it, put it on all our social medias. Folks, please go follow Adrian Martinez. He's on Facebook. He's on Instagram. His show, Invest in Yourself Clothing, second to none, on YouTube. Are you on audio as well, or just YouTube right now?
Yeah. I'm on every platform. Invest in Yourself podcast. That's what it's under. But you know, I'll send my links over to Chip, and they'll be in the video description as well.
Absolutely. We'll put links to the whole thing there so you can go follow it along, go back and check all of his back episodes. They're absolutely amazing. And that will do it, folks. Adrian, I wish you nothing but the best going forward, my friend. And I'm really excited about this documentary. You got one view coming for sure, and that's from me.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. Well, thank you for this opportunity, man. I appreciate it.
All right, my brother. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Hollywood Wade. That was Invest in Yourself podcast, Adrian Martinez, and we are out of time. Adrian, we appreciate it, my friend.
Thank you.